All right, you should have just completed your first gist. We're going to go ahead and continue reading. This is another shorter section, and you are going to be writing a second gist. So make sure you're listening for any new information that you've heard. All right, we are starting about halfway down page 48, where we just left off. Most of those gathered at the meeting had been slaves at one time and knew how oppressive some of the whites around them could be. And while Philadelphia had approximately 3,000 free blacks, there were still over 200 blacks being kept as slaves. They were also well aware that the opportunities routinely granted to white citizens to rise in business and politics were still being denied to them. In 1793, over 50% of Philadelphia's blacks were live-in domestic workers, doing the cooking, cleaning, laundering, and child caring for better-off whites. We're going to take a second to look at this image provided. It says, the August advertisement for a runaway slave was just one of the many reminders to free blacks in Philadelphia that their status in the United States was still quite precarious. We're going to take a second to read this as well, going along with this image. It says, Absalom Jones gazes out resolutely in this 1810 portrait done by Charles Wilson Peele's son, Raphael. Every one of them had suffered in one way or another at the hands of whites, some of them in appalling ways. Two of the elders, Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, had once been worshipers at St. George Methodist Church, a congregation composed of both whites and blacks. The blacks had actually helped erect the church building, and Allen was a preacher popular among all members. Then, one day, as Jones knelt in prayer at the altar, white trustees grabbed him and ordered him to sit in the back of the church. Jones was a large man and strong enough to shake off his attackers, but he did not respond to his mishandling with force of his own. In a calm voice, he told the trustees, "Wait until the prayer is over, and I will trouble you no more." Black parishioners then walked out of St. George's, and Jones and Allen had each established a separate church of his own. As recently as that very summer, they had been shown their position in the Philadelphia society that was now pleading for their help. Several black leaders had attempted to raise $3,000 in order to build a new church, only to discover that few whites were willing to contribute. But when the refugees from Santo Domingo began arriving, those same people were eager to hand over more than $15,000 in donations for the new arrivals' relief. Adding to the insult was the fact that many of these refugees had brought along their own slaves. If any group of individuals had reason to ignore the sufferings of their neighbors, the elders of the Free African Society certainly did. Yet they did not hesitate. They were, as Jones and Allen would write later, sensible that it was our duty to do all the good we could to our fellow mortals. That is where we're pausing for gist 2. So on the next slide, you should be writing your gist, telling me what new information you just learned.